Welcome to We Can Wednesday, where we unstop the story. I am Unstoppable Tracy, doing a 10-part series where we have been looking at effective meeting facilitation. And we've started off the ball right with the planning and the agendas and the facilitating the purpose and closing the meeting off with a bang. And now we've been getting into effective facilitation during the meeting. So, starting and ending on time seems obvious, but go back and listen to that particular technique and looking at verbal cues and looking at some of the breakdowns and understanding. So, the piece de resistance, week 9 of 10, we are now looking at dealing with disruptive behavior. And so if everything else is we've got a clear meaning, we've started and ending on time, we are respectful and we're paraphrasing as we're facilitating through with the verbal cues, etc., and we still get some disruptive behavior, I think the first thing is to remember it's really important that generally it's unintentional and it can seriously inhibit a meeting's progress, even if it is unintentional, because the focus of attention is on the behavior instead of the discussion. And I mean, all of you know this all too well. And this can be with family dynamics of all ages. It's not just your teens. And it's also something that happens on Zoom meetings, whether we think it does or not. We certainly know the reality of it in person-to-person meetings. But it is the meeting leader's responsibility, you're the parent head or you're the leader of this Zoom meeting or an in-person meeting, it's your responsibility to stop the disruptive behavior before it interferes with the group's progress. So an effective leader will discourage that disruptive behavior without embarrassing the person or inhibiting participation. This is a fine balance. So you're supposed to stop the behavior, but you're not meant to embarrass them and you're not meant to inhibit participation. So there's 3 big balls you're doubling right there. So you want to handle the disruptive behavior. Here's 4 steps to help you juggle this fine balance of not inhibiting participation, not embarrassing person, but stopping the disruptive behavior. So stay calm, reinforce acceptable behavior, refer to ground rules, and refocus. 1, 2, 3, 4. So 1, stay calm. Whether the disruptive behavior is happening or not, you want to feign that relaxed composure. And you want to use those nonverbal cues, such as looking away from the disruptor or walking behind the disruptor if you're lucky to be in person, if you're leading the meeting from the standing position. So sometimes just proximity is enough. And maybe it's on Zoom, you're like, oh, Joe, you pop up on my screen closest to my face. I see you more than anybody. Here, let me get back on track. Let me get back on track. And if necessary, give the disruptor a dissatisfied glance, if you can, if it's around a dinner table or in person. But all of this is nonverbal, not singling a person out in a major way. And sometimes that's all it takes. I find that's what works for me, and something informal. And then the other piece is reinforcing the acceptable behavior. So focusing positive attention on the person's acceptable behavior. People tend to repeat the behavior that receives the most attention. And I know that I'm a teacher, and we kind of feel like this is a school classroom a little bit. But it's true of all ages, at the family meeting, but also in managerial meetings, would you believe? At Air Canada, when we were dealing with pilot strikes, at Uber, when we were busting Uber into Canada. It's just focusing on people's acceptable behavior. And then referring to ground rules, which you did way back in week 1 in the early weeks of this piece that we talked about. So we're not inventing a ground rule because all of a sudden disruptive behavior's here. We've got them in place. So when necessary, remind the group of some of the ground rules that were set at the beginning so that it addresses the whole group rather than singling out any one individual. And you're acknowledging those feelings, right? You're like, I realize we're getting to the 11th hour. Our time is almost up. I promise we're going to end on time. But we do have these agenda items that we agreed to. So what we said was we would focus on the topic, not the people. And so can I regroup us all in full participation, because we were aiming for, consensus where possible. And so we need everybody's participation or whatever it might be. That's a rough example pulling up, but those are your ground rules that aren't an individual. They're to do with the whole group, that were established long before any disruptive behavior popped up. And 4, refocus the discussion on the original topic. So you might summarize or clarify what was being discussed prior to the disruptive behavior. And so it just looks like you're summarizing. And you're re-engaging the group in discussion on that summarized topic. Just to recap, here's a summary. So focus. So any other thoughts on this? And you might want to call on a particular person, someone other than the disruptor, to give their opinion or idea without them feeling singled out. But you think somebody that like maybe tilts their head and like, oh yeah, or and they have a thinking face. Say, oh, I notice here on Zoom you've got a bit of a thinking face. Is that an itchy nose, or is there something you want to say about this topic, right? Give them an out. And this is my behavior and personality. You're going to use your personality to do that. So stay calm, reinforce acceptable behavior, refer to ground rules, and refocus discussion on original topic. And you can do that by summarizing potentially, and then calling on someone else other than the disruptor, if you're seeing in the Zoom faces or in person a way to call somebody else. So when these approaches fail, after all of that, without singling a person out, without trying to embarrass the person, it's only then, and after you've started on time, and after you've made ground rules a long time ago, and after you've had a really cool and cruel, no cruelness, a really focused, specific objective and purpose to that meeting. So all of these other plans from all other 9 weeks of 10 are in place, and you've done these 4 handling techniques without singling the person out and without embarrassing somebody. When this all fails, it's then that you might be necessary to make a direct statement to the disruptor, and focus on the behavior, not the individual. So when making this type of statement, right? Like when you're humming and grunting, is there something you want to add? Or you've hit the floor and we're trying to do equal participation here, but it's distracting people from having an equal and valuable participation at the time. I want everybody to have a say, including you, so something's disgrunting, right? And you might say to the individual who's using their BlackBerry or something, disrupting the meeting, like, what is it that's lacking focus that you think is causing people not to participate valuably because somebody is kind of doing disruptive behavior? And maybe they're not even aware that they're clicking or kicking, or that their mic is on when the main person's speaking, and those kinds of things. So try to think about, if something's coming up and somebody's doing something that's disrupting the meeting, have in your roster some friendly ways, non-embarrassing, to not single the person out, and that you have tried all these other subtle nonverbal techniques before bringing it to their attention. But you're not saying, Tracy, you're disrupting the meeting. You're saying, again, try whole group, somebody's mic's on. Can you all double check? And then if not, and you know who it is, that's a nice, easy Zoom one. That's not going to embarrass anybody that's doing it by accident. But if somebody's grunting or gesturing or predominating non-verbally the conversation that's taking away from somebody else participating, just speak to the thing they're doing. So that is dealing with disruptive behavior. And we have had 9 weeks of planning and facilitating and concluding the meeting. And you see me flipping my paper because I'm so excited that next week, week 10, after doing our planning and our facilitating the opening and doing the engaging participants and doing the focusing on people and doing the conclusion and doing on time focus and doing verbal cues and doing difficult of opportunities influencing things and differencing of opinions in week 8. And now this week, disruptive behavior, we're finally at the end of our 10-week series, and we're going to take it to where we really want, the insight and action. We have spent 10 weeks getting here where we are ready to take action. So tune in to week 10 of 10 next week for the final stage of ready to take action. I am Unstoppable Tracy. Allow me to help facilitate your meetings when you need somebody objective. Also, tune in to Unstop the Story. Unstop, one word, the story on your favorite platform for your favorite podcast with Unstoppable Tracy. Unstop the Story on this We Can Wednesday. Bye for now, folks.